Summer nights in our neighborhood are supposed to be quiet, peaceful, the kind of stillness where you can hear crickets in the distance and the soft hum of an air conditioner through an open window. That night, my daughter Ellie was already upstairs in bed, her bedroom door closed, and I was sunk deep into my old recliner, letting the soft glow of the table lamp pool over the armrest. I'd just finished a long shift at the security firm and was savoring the quiet when a strange beam of light cut across the closed blinds. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor's car pulling into their driveway. But the light didn't move the way headlights do. It swept slowly, deliberately, pausing to glare against the front door. I stood up and edged toward the window, lifting the corner of the curtain just enough to peek out. There it was, a white golf cart, with the HOA's logo stenciled neatly on the side engine, barely audible, parked right at the curb in front of my house. Behind the wheel sat Linda Caraway, our HOA president. If you ask most people around here, they'll tell you she's the type of person who thinks the rules are her personal weapon. They call her Karen when she's out of earshot, though never to her face. She was wearing that familiar self-satisfied smirk clipboard in one hand, flashlight in the other. She got out of the cart boots clicking against the concrete and walked straight up to my door like she owned the place. No knock, no greeting, just a flashlight beam sweeping over my address numbers, then the sound of paper being clipped to my door frame. She stepped back, phone in hand, snapping a photo like she was documenting a crime scene. I stayed still, watching her through the narrow gap in the curtains. Years of military police training had taught me not to react too fast. Observe first, decide later. I pulled my phone from my pocket and quietly opened the Ring app. The camera feed popped up. There she was in perfect high definition, every movement time-stamped and recorded. When she turned back toward the cart, her flashlight caught my mailbox, as if double-checking her target. Then she climbed back in, tapped the gas, and the cart drifted slowly down the street, vanishing into the shadows. I waited until the taillights disappeared before I opened the door. The paper she'd left was a bright yellow violation notice. Notice of violation was printed in bold at the top. It accused me of letting my grass grow more than 3 inches high. Funny considering I'd mowed it that past Sunday, and of installing a motion sensor security camera pointed at the community common area without architectural committee approval. I couldn't help but laugh under my breath. The camera was mounted over my back deck, pointed toward my own yard, with a narrow view of the back gate. And as for the grass, I keep it neat enough to be in a landscaping magazine. This was nothing but theater. I carried the notice into the kitchen, laid it flat on the counter, and didn't touch it again. Reacting in anger was exactly what Linda wanted. I'd learned long ago that the real battles are won with patience and a paper trail, not shouting matches. So instead of firing off an angry email, I went to my desk and pulled out a small leather notebook. I wrote down the date and time, a description of her visit, and noted that the Ring camera had captured the entire thing. Then I moved the video file into a new folder on my laptop, labeling it Late Night Notice. Ellie patted down the stairs an hour later, hair mussed from sleep rubbing her eyes. Dad was there, a light outside. I saw it through my blinds. I didn't want her worrying, but lying outright wasn't my style. It's just the HOA doing their rounds. Go on back to bed, kiddo. Everything's fine. She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me. She'd seen me pull HOA envelopes from the mailbox before. She knew they were never good news. After she went back upstairs, I sat in the dark, my mind already working through the situation. This wasn't the first time the HOA had poked at me. They'd sent notices about delivery trucks parked for more than 15 minutes, about the shade of paint on my back gate, even about the position of my trash bin on collection day. But something about tonight felt different. Linda showing up in person after dark without warning, that was a move meant to intimidate. And intimidation only works if you're willing to be intimidated. I got up, locked the front door, and checked the feed from all 3 of my exterior cameras. Every angle was crystal clear, each file backed up to the cloud. If Linda wanted a fight, I wasn't going to play her game. I was going to play mine, the kind where every word, every step, every second is documented. The rest of the night, I couldn't shake the thought of her face in the flashlight beam, smug and sure she'd rattled me. She had no idea that all she'd done was hand me Exhibit A. The next morning, while sipping coffee, I heard the soft electric whine of the golf cart again. I stayed behind the curtain and saw her rolling by slowly, another HOA officer in the passenger seat. She was pointing at my house, saying something I couldn't hear. It felt like a message. We're watching you. Fine. Let them watch. I had my own set of eyes. And unlike theirs, mine told the truth. 2 mornings later, I got my answer about whether Linda planned to escalate. I was out back with Rook, my shepherd mix, enjoying the cool air before the day's heat settled in. The gate to the side yard creaked, suddenly metal latch clicking open. Rook's head shot up, ears forward, a low rumble starting in his throat. I turned toward the sound and froze, not out of fear, but out of disbelief. There she was again. Linda, standing in my yard, camera slung around her neck, phone in her hand, like she was on some official inspection tour. What exactly do you think you're doing? I asked, keeping my tone measured but firm. She didn't even bother to look embarrassed. This area is part of the HOA easement, she said, waving a hand vaguely toward the grass. I have the right to inspect for compliance. Your security light is directed at a common area. That's a violation. I knew better. That easement she was referring to, it ran behind the fence line, public access for utilities. This patch of grass she was standing on belonged to me, paid for by my mortgage every month. You're trespassing, I told her flatly. I'm asking you to leave my property, now. She smirked. You should read your CC Pazars, Mike. The HOA can enter for inspections at any time. I raised my hand and pointed up to the corner of the house. I have read them, and I'm recording this interaction as we speak. For the first time, there was a flicker of hesitation in her expression. But it passed quickly. She lifted her phone, snapped 2 more pictures, then turned for the gate. Before she stepped out, she tossed over her shoulder, "You'll be hearing from us soon." The latch clanged shut. Rook gave a final low growl as I walked back to the deck. Inside, I went straight to the back camera feed. It had her entire entry on video, from opening the gate to taking pictures to walking back out. Crystal clear. The timestamp and geotag would make it hard for her to claim she'd stayed on common property. That file went into the same evidence folder as before, labeled 02. Trespass photo incident. I made a note in my leather notebook, date, time, description, witnesses. Rook doesn't count in court, but he's a good reminder for me. Later that afternoon, Ellie got home from school with a large white envelope in her hand, HOA logo in the corner. She placed it on the counter without a word. Inside was, "Second notice, immediate compliance required." This one was longer. It listed failure to cooperate with HOA inspection security camera aimed at common area and of obstructing HOA staff. It warned that failure to comply could result in fines of up to $250 per day and a lien placed against the property. Ellie's voice was small when she asked Dad, "Can they take our house?" I pulled out a chair and had her sit. "No. They're trying to scare us, that's all. We haven't done anything wrong, and I'm keeping records of everything. But if you see them around here, especially in the yard, I want you to come inside right away and tell me. Don't talk to them, okay?" She nodded, but the worry didn't leave her eyes. I hated that this was seeping into her life. At 14, she should be thinking about homework and soccer practice, not whether strangers in polo shirts could take her home away. The next morning, I called my neighbor, Carlos Alvarez. He lived on the corner and had been on the receiving end of Linda's enforcement before. His son had parked overnight in front of his own house and still got a violation. When I told him what had happened, Carlos sighed. "Mike, I've been through it. She came into my yard last year with a measuring tape checking my fence height. I didn't have proof at the time, but I do now. I'll send you the pictures, and you should talk to Tanya Lee. She's 2 streets over, got fined for planting roses without permission. I think she'd be willing to help you." We met that afternoon at a coffee shop off Main Street. Carlos brought an envelope full of printed stills from his security camera. Sure enough, there was Linda stepping over his low gate, holding a tape measure, even bending to look under his porch. "These are good," I told him. "Do you have the originals?" "Yeah, on a USB. I'll email them too. And Tanya, she's got stories that'll make your blood boil." As I drove home, I started thinking about what Carlos had said. If Linda was doing this to me, to Carlos, to Tanya, chances were she'd done it to others. And if enough of us compared notes, a pattern would emerge, a pattern that might interest people outside this neighborhood. When I got back, I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. Each row was an incident date, time description, person involved, type of violation claimed, and what evidence existed. My goal wasn't just to protect myself anymore. It was to map the full scope of Linda's overreach. Around sunset, I heard the faint electric whir of the golf cart again. This time, I didn't peek. I stood in plain view at the front window. Linda slowed, glanced over, and I could see her eyes narrow before she drove on. The message was clear, she was watching me. But my message was clear too. I was watching right back. By the end of that week, the pattern had shifted from occasional tension to a steady drumbeat of provocation. The next letter didn't even come in the mail, it was hand-delivered. I found it tucked under my doormat on Friday morning, folded neatly in a plastic sleeve to keep the dew off. That small touch told me exactly who had delivered it. This one wasn't just a notice. It was a thinly veiled ultimatum: remove the security camera within 5 days, submit to a follow-up inspection, and pay $125 in administrative fees for non-compliance. Failure to do so, it warned, would result in further enforcement action. It wasn't even signed by the board, just Linda Caraway, president. I set the letter on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long moment. The problem wasn't just that she was wrong on the facts. It was the arrogance in assuming I'd fold the moment she typed a number on a piece of paper. That afternoon, I took a slow walk around the block. Every time I passed a house with a camera above the garage or a motion light on the porch, I made a note in my phone. There were plenty more than a dozen homes with setups nearly identical to mine. None of them had yellow notices on their doors. I caught Carlos out front washing his truck. He grinned when he saw me. Got another love letter from the Queen. Delivered by hand this time, I said. You know anyone else who's gotten one for a camera? He shook his head. Only you. And if she tries it on me, she'll regret it. Later that evening, I reached out to Tanya. She answered on the second ring, her voice wary at first, until I explained who I was. When I mentioned Linda's habit of stepping into people's yards without warning, Tanya's voice sharpened. She's done that here. Twice. I have a little terrier, thank God he didn't get out. I'll send you the clips. If you're putting something together, I want in. The clips arrived an hour later. Linda, in a wide-brimmed sun hat, pushing open Tanya's gate, inspecting her flower beds. It was like she didn't even care if cameras were rolling. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table, with my laptop, the leather notebook, and a fresh cup of coffee. I built the spreadsheet out further now, with 3 separate homeowners listed, dates, times, file links. I added a column for HOA claim and another for actual condition. Side by side, the contrast was laughable. But one thing nagged at me: if Linda felt bold enough to do this in daylight, in clear view of cameras, what was she willing to do when no one was watching? The answer came the next afternoon. I was in the garage, tightening a loose hinge on the side door when Rook barked from the backyard. I stepped out to find Linda at the back gate, hand on the latch. She didn't open it this time, just leaned over far enough to shout, "Final warning, Mike. Next time I won't be the one knocking." She said it with a strange half-smile, like she already had something planned. Then she walked off golf cart parked just down the alley. I didn't say a word back. But inside I felt the click of a line being crossed. A challenge had been issued, and I wasn't going to wait around to see what she meant. That evening, I called an old friend, Naomi Brooks, now working in the city attorney's office. We'd served together years ago. If anyone could tell me the right way to document and report this kind of thing, it was her. Naomi listened without interrupting, then asked, "You've got timestamps and video." "Every time." "Good. Keep them backed up in at least 2 places. And Mike, if she tries to use law enforcement as a scare tactic, you call me immediately." Abuse of 911 isn't just unethical, it's illegal. Her words stuck with me, because deep down I suspected that was exactly where Linda was headed. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day when the sun hangs low enough to throw long shadows across the cul-de-sac. Ellie had just gotten home from school, still in her soccer warm-up jacket, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. I glanced through the front window and felt my stomach knot. Linda's golf cart was parked in the street directly in front of my house, angled in just enough to block part of the driveway. But she wasn't alone this time. There was a uniformed police officer standing beside her notepad in hand. I opened the door, slowly letting the screen swing wide. "Can I help you, officer?" The officer, a tall man in his 40s with a calm expression, looked at me and said, "Sir, we received a call reporting that you'd threatened a member of the HOA with physical harm. I'm here to ask you a few questions." Behind him, Linda stood with her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't make eye contact with me. I took a breath and kept my voice even. "You're saying she called and told you that?" The officer nodded. "That's what was reported." I could feel Ellie's eyes on me from the doorway behind. "Officer, before we go any further, I'd like to show you something." I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the Ring camera app. This is the most recent interaction I had with Ms. Caraway. It was 2 days ago. She approached my back gate, issued a so-called final warning, and left. No threats were made by me or anyone else. I held the phone out, and he watched the clip carefully. The timestamp was clear, the audio sharp. Linda's voice carried plainly. Mine was absent altogether. When he handed the phone back, I added I also have footage from every other interaction she's initiated over the past month. All of them recorded, all with audio. The officer's expression didn't change much, but I caught the subtle shift in his eyes. He turned to Linda. "Ma'am, were you aware you were being recorded?" Linda hesitated. I assumed he might have cameras, but that doesn't mean. The officer cut her off gently but firmly. "Ma'am, if you're making a report of a criminal threat, you understand that filing a false report is a crime in itself." The color drained slightly from her face. "I'm just trying to keep the community safe." I stayed silent, let her words hang in the air. After a few more questions, the officer handed me a card. "If she contacts you again in a way you believe is harassment, call the non-emergency line and reference this incident number. And if you have more footage you'd like to share, you can submit it directly through our online portal." When they left, Ellie stepped outside, her face pale. "Dad, she lied to the police about you." "I know," I said quietly. "And now we have proof." That night, I organized every clip into a folder labeled HOA Harassment, Law Enforcement. I uploaded a copy to the cloud, another to an encrypted drive. Then I wrote a timeline from memory, adding each event with exact dates and details. Naomi called just before 9. "I saw the report come through," she said. "Mike, this is exactly the kind of thing we talked about. Keep documenting. If she calls 911 again without cause, that's not just harassment. That's a prosecutable offense." Her calm, steady voice was like a stabilizing anchor in rough seas. I realized I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building a case brick by brick, one that would be impossible to knock over. But I also knew people like Linda didn't back down easily. She doubled down once, and she'd do it again. And the next time, she might not just bring one officer to my door. By the weekend, it was clear Linda wasn't going to let the police visit be the end of it. If anything, it seemed to fuel her. Saturday morning, I stepped out onto the porch with a cup of coffee and noticed a fresh stack of envelopes in my mailbox, 3, all from the HOA. The first was labeled Violation Escalation Notice, citing the same non-compliance over the camera and tacking on an additional $250 fine. The second accused me of interfering with the duties of the HOA board, a charge so vague it could mean anything from disagreeing at a meeting to breathing too loudly in their presence. The third was a notice of a special compliance hearing to be held in 2 weeks at the clubhouse. It was classic intimidation: bury someone in paperwork, make them spend their energy just responding. I brought the letters inside and laid them on the table without opening the others. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Carlos. She's coming at me from every angle now. Multiple letters in one day, all bogus. Carlos let out a low whistle. "She's trying to push you into making a mistake. Don't give her that satisfaction. Keep building your case. You want me and Tanya at that hearing." "Definitely," I said. "I think it's time they see they're not just picking on one person." That afternoon, Tanya came over with a thumb drive. She'd compiled all her own incidents into a neat folder, photos, video clips, even screen captures of emails from Linda, where the tone slipped from professional to outright hostile. As we sat at the kitchen table, I started a new spreadsheet column. Other residents affected. Under each of our names, I listed the dates of our encounters with Linda. The overlapping patterns were starting to form like a fingerprint trespass, exaggerated or fabricated violations, and in my case, escalation to police involvement. But I knew Linda wasn't done with me specifically. She'd crossed a line with that false police report, and she didn't strike me as someone who'd walk away without trying again. That moment came sooner than expected. Sunday evening, just as Ellie and I were finishing dinner, I heard the faint electric whir of the golf cart again. This time, I checked the front camera before going to the window. Linda was idling at the curb phone, to her ear, eyes locked on my house. I hit record on the live feed. A minute later, I saw the familiar flash of red and blue lights at the far end of the street. 2 patrol cars rolled in, stopping directly in front of my driveway. My jaw tightened. Ellie froze beside me. "Dad." "It's okay," I told her quietly. "We're ready." I stepped outside before they even made it up the walkway. The lead officer, Sergeant Cole Ramirez, a name I recognized from Naomi's contacts, approached with a professional but cautious expression. "Mr. Jensen," he began, "we got a call reporting there was a disturbance here involving a weapon." My hands stayed visible at my sides. There is no weapon. There is no disturbance. And I have security footage from the last 2 hours to prove it. From the corner of my eye, I saw Linda standing with exaggerated concern on the sidewalk, talking animatedly to the second officer. Ramirez glanced toward her, then back at me. "Would you be willing to show me that footage?" "Of course," I said. "It's all time-stamped." I led him inside, pulled up the ring feed, and scrolled through the last several hours. There was nothing but Ellie and me in the kitchen, Rook lying on the back deck, and the quiet of a normal Sunday. No weapon, no disturbance. Ramirez watched closely, then straightened. "This matches what your neighbor Carlos just told us," he said. "He saw her on the phone pacing in front of your house for several minutes before we arrived." When we stepped back outside, Ramirez walked over to Linda. I couldn't hear every word, but her voice had lost its confident edge. She kept gesturing vaguely toward my house, but Ramirez's tone stayed steady, unyielding. Finally, he nodded toward one of the patrol cars, and to my absolute astonishment, Linda's expression cracked, eyes wide, mouth opening in protest, as he motioned for her to step toward it. "Ma'am, you're being detained for filing a false police report," I heard him say clearly. "We'll discuss this further at the station." The sight of her being guided into the back seat, hands behind her, was surreal. Neighbors had begun to gather at the edges of their driveways, murmuring quietly. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I felt the shift, like the weight of her constant looming presence had finally moved off my chest. As the patrol cars pulled away, Ellie whispered, "Dad, did that just really happen?" "Yeah," I said softly. "It did, and it's not over yet." Because now I had more than a stack of violation notices and a folder full of clips. I had an arrest report, and that meant the game had officially changed. The next 48 hours moved fast. By Monday morning, word had already rippled across the cul-de-sac through group texts and whispered conversations over hedges. You didn't have to scroll far on the neighborhood app to find a politely worded post. "Does anyone know why the police were on Hawthorne Court last night?" Within minutes, replies stacked up. Someone had seen flashing lights. Someone else had heard yelling. That turned out to be the sound of a patrol car door closing. No one wanted to type Linda's name, but everyone knew. I kept quiet. I made breakfast, packed Ellie's lunch, and drove her to school like it was any other Monday. In the car, she stared out the window, thumb tracing circles on the fogged glass. "Dad," she said finally, "are the kids at school going to hear about this?" "Maybe," I said. "If they do, you tell them the truth. The police came, they looked at the cameras, and they left with the right person. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did I." She nodded, but the worry stayed etched between her brows. I watched her walk through the school doors and felt that familiar stubbornness set deeper in my chest, the one that says, "Hold the line until the danger passes." Back at the house, an email from the police department sat in my inbox. Case number assigned, evidence submission link. A second email was from Sergeant Ramirez himself, short and professional. "Thank you for your cooperation last night. If you have additional footage, please upload via the portal. I have initiated a supplemental report. See Ramirez." I spent the next hour sorting files. From the Ring doorbell, I pulled the long clip of Linda idling with her phone to her ear. The time-stamped minutes where nothing happened in my living room. The outside angles that showed the quiet street. From the back camera, I added the footage from her final warning at my gate. I labeled each file, cleanly added a single line of context to the upload form, and hit submit. Then I called Naomi. She answered on the first ring. "I was about to call you," she said. "We saw the detention come through. Ramirez is solid. He won't play politics with this." "Is it an arrest?" I asked. Detained and transported on suspicion of making a false report. The DA decides how to file it. In the meantime, two things. One, file a harassment report with the HOA's management company if they use one. Two, start a public records request for any CAD notes and body cam footage from the call. Even if you never need it, make the paper trail exist. I could hear her typing. I'll email you a template, she said. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Quiet, methodical, documented. The HOA email arrived that afternoon as if nothing had happened. Special compliance hearing reminder. Subject line, crisp and neutral. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Clubhouse. Bring proof of compliance. Attendance mandatory. The message was signed, Linda Caraway, President. Like her name hadn't been read out loud from the back of a patrol car the night before, Carlos forwarded the email to me with a single line. You want us there. Yes, I wrote back. You and Tanya. Bring copies of your clips. No speeches, just presence. Around 4 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found a man in his early 50s with an HOA name badge clipped to his belt. He was one of the quieter board members' treasurer, if I remembered right. Mark Patel. He had a careful look on his face. The look of a person who knew he was stepping into a mess not of his making. Mr. Jensen, he said, may I speak with you for a moment? I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. Mark folded his hands. I can't discuss last night, he began, but I wanted to assure you the board is reviewing processes. He chose each word like it might break. The hearing on Wednesday will proceed. I encourage you to attend. I'll be there, I said, with evidence, and with neighbors who've had similar experiences. He swallowed, then met my eyes. Understood. He hesitated. For what it's worth, not everyone on the board knew about these tactics. Tactics, a tidy word for months of intrusion. Still, it mattered that someone inside was willing to show a sliver of spine. Thank you, I said. One more thing, will Ms. Caraway be presiding? Mark looked down at his shoes. It's under discussion. He nodded once and left steps careful on the path like he was afraid to make a sound. When Ellie got home, she found me at the dining table with the laptop open and a neat stack of papers laid out, violation notices. Printed screenshots, a copy of the CC with fluorescent highlights and tabs like a college textbook. Rook lay at my feet, chin on his paws, eyes tracking every motion. Ellie sank into the chair across from me. Is it the HOA again? She asked, sliding onto one of the counter stools. No, wait, that was from the previous story. In this one, it's Ellie sank into the chair across from me. Are we going to beat them? We're not trying to beat anyone, I said, and realized it was only half true. We're going to show the truth. The truth usually does the beating on its own. That night, the neighborhood app grew bolder. A post appeared from a username I didn't recognize. Is the HOA allowed to go into backyards without permission? Replies arrived from people I knew and people I didn't, some cautious, some outraged. One photo was attached, Linda's golf cart, taken from a second-story window parked near Tanya's street. The caption under it was a single word, enough. Tuesday morning, a short clipped email went out from Vice President Denise Harper. The board will convene an executive session before the scheduled compliance hearing. Residents wishing to speak may sign up on arrival. There was no signature line from Linda, no flourish. Just the apparatus of a machine trying to remember how to function without the person who'd driven it into a ditch. I spent the day preparing like I used to before an inspection gear laid out, batteries charged, redundancies planned. I exported a clean 10-minute compilation clip that told the story with no narration required, late-night notice. Trespass at the back gate. The final warning, the patrol cars, the quiet cooperation. For each segment, I matched a still frame printout with the timestamp. I tucked copies into a simple black folder, the kind auditors love, because it's the only color that never begs for attention. In the afternoon, Ramirez called. Mr. Jensen, quick update, he said. I can't discuss the case status, but I did add an advisory to our dispatch system for future calls to your address. It flags prior false report concerns. If someone calls in from the street, responding units will be aware. Understood, I said. Thank you. He paused. And Mr. Jensen, keep your interactions neutral tomorrow night. If anyone tries to provoke you, step away. We'll have a unit nearby. I appreciate that, I said. As I hung up, I felt a small, odd wave of relief. Not victory, not yet. Just the sense that the grown-ups were quietly stepping into the room. That evening, Carlos and Tanya came by. We didn't strategize speeches. We aligned facts. Carlos had 3 printed stills and a 2-minute clip. Tanya had 2 clips and 1 email where Linda had typed, "I don't need to follow process when safety is at stake." A sentence so reckless it almost looked fake until you checked the header trail. We keep it simple, I told them. We don't make it personal. We don't even say her name unless asked. We say, "Here is what happened. Here is the rule. Here is the evidence." Let them look at it and hear their own silence. Carlos smiled grimly. "You sure you don't want to be a lawyer?" "God, no," I said. "I just know how to brief a case." After they left, Ellie and I stood on the back deck in the easy dark. Somewhere down the block, a wind chime knocked gently like glass rain. "Will she be there?" Ellie asked. "I don't know," I said, "but we will be." She leaned her head against my arm. "I hate that this happened, but I don't hate that everyone's going to know what she did." The old instincts stirred in me, the ones that say, "Prepare, don't posture. Prove, don't provoke." I locked the back gate, checked the cameras one last time, and set 2 alarms. On Wednesday, we would walk into the clubhouse with the simplest weapon I'd ever carried, a stack of quiet truths. The clubhouse smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet when we walked in Wednesday evening. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that sterile glow that makes faces look paler, sharper. A folding table was set up near the entrance with a clipboard labeled "Sign-in Sheet Compliance Hearing." Carlos and Tanya were already there, dressed neatly, folders in hand. They gave me a quick nod as I signed my name. Behind the table, Vice President Denise Harper sat with a polite, unreadable smile. She gestured toward the seating area rows of metal chairs facing the long dais where the board members would sit. The center chair, Linda's, was empty. That empty chair said more than any opening statement could have. We took seats in the second row. I noticed several neighbors slipping in, some out of curiosity, others with that tight-lipped look of people who'd had their own run-ins with the HOA. Conversations were hushed, the air heavy with the anticipation of something unusual. At exactly 7 o'clock, Denise called the meeting to order. "This is a special compliance hearing regarding alleged violations at the property of Mr. Michael Jensen," she said, her voice calm, measured. "We will begin with a summary from the board, followed by the opportunity for Mr. Jensen to respond." She glanced to her right, where Treasurer Mark Patel sat, papers neatly stacked. "Mr. Patel will present." Mark cleared his throat and read from a printed sheet. The list was familiar non-compliant security camera failure to cooperate with inspection interference with HOA duties. As he spoke, his tone lacked conviction. It was more recital than accusation. When he finished, Denise looked at me. "Mr. Jensen, you may respond." I stood, taking my black folder to the small lectern set up for speakers. The microphone was unnecessary in the small room, but it picked up the soft shuffle of papers as I opened the folder. "Madam Vice President, members of the board, and neighbors," I began. "I want to be clear from the start, these violations are not only unfounded, but they are part of a documented pattern of harassment by the HOA President, Ms. Caraway." I lifted the first still photo, Linda standing at my front door at night, yellow notice in hand. This was my first notice. I had mowed my lawn 2 days earlier. The camera in question is visible in the frame. It points into my yard, not the common area. The next still, Linda stepping through my back gate. This is my property, not common easement. There is no provision in the CC Plaza Rs allowing board members to enter without notice or permission except in emergencies. This was neither. I clicked a small remote and the monitor on the wall lit up with a clip from my USB drive. The late night visit, the trespass, the final warning at my gate, the patrol cars pulling up, Linda being led away. Each clip was short, clean, time-stamped. I didn't narrate over them. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the monitor. When the last clip ended, I said simply, "These are the facts. They show no violations on my part. They do show repeated trespass, baseless accusations, and 2 instances where police were called without cause." I slid a printed timeline across the table to Denise. "Every incident date and piece of evidence is logged here. Copies are available for any board member or resident who wishes to review them. Mark accepted the folder without meeting my eyes. Denise skimmed the first page, her expression tightening almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, Mr. Jensen," she said. "Does the board have any questions?" Silence. Even the secretary kept her pen still. Denise turned to the room. "We will deliberate in executive session. Residents, please wait outside for a few minutes." As we stepped into the hallway, Carlos clapped my shoulder. That was Surgical Man. Tanya leaned in. "You didn't just defend yourself, you handed them the map out of this mess." We waited in low conversation for nearly 20 minutes before the door opened. Denise invited us back in. "The board has voted unanimously to dismiss all violations against Mr. Jensen," she announced. "Furthermore, the board will be reviewing internal procedures regarding inspections, communications, and interactions with residents. Effective immediately, all board members will be required to provide written notice and obtain consent before entering private property, except in emergencies." The words landed in the room like a stone in still water. Even the residents who hadn't been on my side seemed to exhale. Then Denise added, "Ms. Caraway has voluntarily stepped down as president effective today. The board will appoint an interim president until the next election." I kept my expression neutral, but inside the shift was seismic. The chair at the center of the dais would stay empty. As the meeting adjourned, neighbors I barely knew came up to shake my hand. One older gentleman said quietly, "Took a lot of guts to stand up there." Ellie slipped her hand into mine as we walked out into the cool night air. "It's over?" she asked. I looked down at her. "Almost," I said, "but the hard part's done." In the parking lot, the glow from the clubhouse windows spilled across the pavement, catching the edges of faces, neighbors talking in small groups, voices lighter now. It felt like the beginning of something different. I didn't know it yet, but the real healing was about to start. The quiet after the hearing was almost unsettling. For months, the low hum of tension had been the background noise of my life, and now it was gone. No golf cart idling at the curb. No HOA envelopes in the mailbox. The street felt lighter, like someone had taken a heavy blanket off its shoulders. Ellie noticed it too. She moved through the house without that twitchy glance toward the window every time a car slowed outside. I stopped checking the cameras first thing in the morning. Even Rook seemed to relax, spending more time sprawled in sunny patches instead of pacing the fence line. 2 days after the hearing, an email from Denise landed in my inbox. The subject line was brisk: "Procedural Review and Interim Policies." It laid out new temporary rules: no board member could step onto private property without written notice, and the homeowner's consent except in a genuine emergency. Alleged violations had to be backed by dated photographs from a lawful vantage point, and any contact with law enforcement now had to go through the management company and the board's legal counsel with documented cause. The last line caught me. "The board is committed to rebuilding trust." I forwarded the email to Naomi. She called within minutes. "That's not just PR," she said. "That's legally sound." Keep that message if anything else comes up. This shows the board recognizes the problem. Wasn't you, it was her. The next day, my public records requests started paying off. The first package was the catalog from both police calls. It was all there: timestamps, call codes, and Ramirez's supplemental report from the second incident. His summary was blunt. Complainant alleged armed threat. Video evidence disproved. Complainant detained for false report. No drama, just the truth in black and white. Another request brought the body cam footage. Parts were redacted, but the essentials remained: me, at the front door, calm, hands visible. Ellie in the background asking about Rook. Ramirez reviewing the ring footage. And outside, Linda describing an armed disturbance that never happened. I copied everything to my evidence drive and backed it up to the cloud. It was a strange feeling having my life boiled down to clean, undeniable clips. That week, the board held its first open forum since the incident. It wasn't a hearing, just an invitation for residents to speak. The empty center chair on the dais was gone. Denise sat in the middle now, flanked by Mark and the secretary. Someone had set out coffee and cookies on a folding table, a small but intentional gesture. People came forward with stories. Carlos described the night his son got a violation for parking in front of their own house. Tanya spoke about Linda walking into her yard to critique her rose bushes. Others mentioned petty citations about porch lights, trash bins, even the shade of paint on their doors. No one had to say Linda's name. When it was my turn, I kept it short. I'm grateful for the board's decision to dismiss the violations. I'm grateful for the policies you've adopted. My only request is that we make these protections permanent, so no one else has to go through this. After the meeting in the parking lot, Carlos asked quietly, "You think the DA will file charges?" I shrugged. "That's their call. I'm not chasing punishment. I'm chasing prevention." Still, some habits take time to unlearn. Ellie still asked if the back gate was locked before bed. I still paused when a cart passed by, but I could feel the ground under my feet again. I started fixing things I'd been ignoring, tightening the porch rail, rehanging the wind chime I'd taken down months ago for peace. When the breeze caught it, the sound felt like a signal that the worst had passed. On Friday, a letter arrived from the HOA's management company, not the board. It confirmed the hearing's outcome, erased the fines from my account, and listed upcoming dates for the CC11R revision workshops. Residents were invited to submit proposals for review by council. I took the email I'd sent Denise after the hearing, the one outlining my 3 pillars of reform, and printed it. I slipped it into a fresh manila folder labeled Proposals. If the board was really opening the door to change, I was going to step through it prepared. That evening, the doorbell rang. A teenager from 2 streets over stood there holding flyers. "We're having a block cookout next Saturday," she said. "Mr. Patel said you might bring your smoker. My mom said only if it's not a bother." I smiled. "It's not a bother. Tell your mom we'll bring ribs and corn." When Ellie heard, her face lit up. "A neighborhood cookout. Can I invite my team?" "Of course," I said. It's about time this place felt like a neighborhood again. The next morning, Naomi called. "How's the quiet life treating you?" she asked. "Strange," I admitted. But the good kind of strange. Before hanging up, she added, "Mike, remember, sometimes the best win isn't in court. It's in making sure the trouble doesn't come back." That night, I walked one last loop around the cul-de-sac. The air smelled of smoke and cut grass. At the far end, I spotted Denise looking up at the first stars. She waved. I waved back. Back home, Ellie was scrolling through the pictures from the day. She showed me one rook asleep under the table, kids' shoes scattered around him, a ring of adults' knees, and paper plates framing the scene. "This one's my favorite," she said. "Mine too," I answered, and meant it. That night, I checked the front camera out of habit. The porch sat empty under a soft pool of light. I watched for a few seconds, not looking for trouble, just confirming what I already felt the story had turned. Tomorrow, we'd start the slow work drafting, reviewing, building something better. And we'd keep doing the most stubborn thing you can do, in a place that tried to make fear normal, live like normal was ours to keep. The weeks after the cookout passed without a single knock on my door. For the first time in months, I stopped glancing over my shoulder whenever I walked to the mailbox. The HOA board meetings felt different too, less like tribunals, and more like community roundtables. People spoke without fear of being interrupted, and when disagreements arose, they were settled by procedure, not personality. Naomi came by one Thursday evening, bringing a manila envelope and her usual dry humor. "Officially, you're free to stop saving every scrap of evidence," now she said, setting the envelope on my kitchen table. Inside were printed court records. The false report case had been resolved with a guilty plea. Linda was fined, ordered to perform community service, and barred from holding any HOA position for 5 years. I read the order twice, not because I doubted it, but because it felt so final. "It's over," I said. Naomi sipped the coffee Ellie had made her. "No, it's steady. Over means you stop paying attention. Steady means you keep the habits that got you here." She was right. I'd learned that community isn't a static thing. It's maintained the same way you maintain a fence line. Walk it, check it, repair it when you see a weak board. One Saturday, I noticed the roses Tanya had planted in the common strip blooming again. The city's public works crew had repaired the cracked sidewalk nearby, a project that had been stalled for nearly 2 years. Carlos stopped by with his son to drop off fresh tomatoes from their garden. The ordinary flow of life had returned, but with an edge of awareness, like we'd all agreed without saying it, that we wouldn't let things slip back. Ellie asked one night if I'd ever thought about moving after all that had happened. I told her the truth I had more than once, but standing on the back porch, listening to the wind chimes, and watching the lights from the other porches flicker on, one by one I realized, leaving would mean handing over everything we'd fought for. "This is our home," I told her, "and it's worth standing on for." "No, wait," the original says. "This is our home," I told her, "and it's worth standing up for." By autumn, the resident advisory group was in full swing. We reviewed proposed amendments to the bylaws, added language to protect against unauthorized entry, and created a clear process for disputes. Mark, once hesitant to cross Linda, came one of the loudest voices for transparency. Denise, free from the constant power struggles, proved to be a fair and steady president. I kept my camera system, but now its main use was catching squirrels, raiding the bird feeder. Rook's picture made it onto the HOA's quarterly newsletter as Community Pet of the Month. Ellie rolled her eyes when she saw it, but I caught her smiling too. The healing didn't happen all at once. Trust, once cracked, takes time to set again. But the day I saw Tanya and Mark chatting over coffee at the picnic table, or Carlos teaching the neighbor's kid how to fix a bike chain, I knew we were headed in the right direction. Naomi called one evening just to check in. "How's the quiet life treating you?" she asked. "Strange," I admitted. "But the good kind of strange." Before hanging up, she added, "Mike, remember, sometimes the best win isn't in court. It's in making sure the trouble doesn't come back." That night, I walked one last loop around the cul-de-sac. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, and somewhere down the block, someone was playing an old guitar tune. I passed the spot where Linda's golf cart used to idle, and felt nothing, not anger, not triumph, just peace. Back home, Ellie was at the dining table doing homework. She looked up and asked, "So do you think we're safe now?" I smiled. "I think we're stronger than we were, and that's better than safe." When I turned out the porch light, the street lay quiet under a clear sky. We'd built something more than just a defense against one person's misuse of power. We'd reclaimed the right to live without fear, to trust the people next door, to greet the morning without bracing for a fight. And that, in the end, was the truest victory.